Welcome to the Mixing Glass, brought to you by Bardtenders. I'm your co-host, Michael Wenzer. We've got a really exciting episode for you today. Thanks for joining us. But before we get into that, we have to bring on our lovely host. It's his world. I'm just trying not to die in it, Mr. Jonathan Mateer.
Wow, Mike, that was so nice of you. It was so good. It's a little early for you, isn't it? Like 8?
It's not that early. I have work and stuff usually.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
I have a good one for you today. So I got the giant foam dice that we were using at Elevate, and I gave it to my son to play with this morning.
Yeah.
Which was great. And he immediately picked it up, tried to eat it first, but then
Yeah, of course.
also tried, because he's 7 months old. And then he throws it and he rolls in that one. And I look at my wife and I'm like, what could possibly happen? Immediately reaches for her coffee mug and just dumps it all over the table. Nice. Like, sick.
That's pretty incredible. That's pretty incredible, actually. He knows.
I love when your fantasy becomes reality. Like it just happens immediately.
Wait, was your fantasy to dump your wife's coffee out on the ground?
No, fantasy is D&D, Mike, the other part of our podcast.
Oh, sorry. I got confused.
But also her fantasy might be to dump mine. All right, we're not here to just talk about this. I heard we have a guest with us today.
Yes, we do. I'm excited for this one. Yeah, today we're going to be speaking with Eric Kozlik. And Eric Kozlik is a drinks industry consultant, spirits judge, and podcaster based in Washington, D.C. He began his journey in 2014 when he created a craft bitters brand with some college friends. This gave him the opportunity to collaborate with bartenders and distillers all across the country and explore the art and science of flavor building. From there, and this is where a lot of you might be familiar with him as well, he launched the Modern Bar Cart podcast in 2017, which has been featured in the New York Times and honored 3 different times by Tales of the Cocktail Spirit Awards as a top 10 drinks industry podcast. When he's not podcasting, Eric works as a spirits judge for the American Distilling Institute and the World Drink Awards, among others, and helps all kinds of distillers, bartenders, and organizations as the founder and principal consultant of Direct Fire Consulting. In his off time, he is an enthusiastic home cook and gardener, a student of complex system science, and a passionate outdoorsman. Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, boys. Thanks for having me.
Hey, glad to have you. Glad to have you. We love it when we have, people that have similar passions as ours on the show. We also love when people have amazing sound equipment, which goes a long way. It sounds great. No, we're excited to have you. I know we have some awesome things we're going to talk about today, but before we do that, we like to start with our roll for initiative. I know you got a 20-sided die over there ready to rock and roll.
Yeah, I do. Let's pull up this app. All right. I haven't rolled it. It's starting on an 8, which I don't know. So we'll see where it goes from here. Oh, no. This is exactly what we didn't want to happen.
Are you sure?
I think so.
13?
Yeah.
I think you'll like this one. All right. Question number 13. If life were a video game, what's one cheat code you wish you could use?
Oh, man. This sends me back to Age of Empires 2 with cheesesteak Jimmy's and
unlimited gold. Unlimited gold.
Yeah, Robin Hood was unlimited gold. Cheat code.
Lumberjack for wood, I think. I can't remember.
Yep. Yeah. I think an amazing cheat code would be like the any like a fast travel cheat code like you can do. Yeah, I think I would just copy paste a fast travel cheat code. And don't get me wrong, I do enjoy taking a nice drive.
Yeah, because you like listening to podcasts, right? Like the Modern Bar Cart and Bar.
Yeah, I love listening to my own voice. But I think fast travel would have its advantages, and just to sort of like specifically for airline travel, because I don't know about you, but I certainly don't have the money to travel by air in any way that's resembles comfortable. So if I could fast travel from coast to coast and avoid, maybe just sleepwalk my way through the transfers, then that would be amazing, because Charlotte, I hear, is a nice place, but their airport is among my least favorite.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll get lucky and they'll invent the Star Trek transporters, and we'll be able to get rid of that anyways.
There we go.
Mike, how about you this morning? You got a cheat code you want in real life?
There's not really a cheat code for sleep in any game that I'm aware of.
There is now. Use it.
It's like the most boring video game ever.
Uh,
Yeah, getting some like we've done this so many times, Eric. It's hard to, continually come up with good ones. Yeah, some
true.
infinite, some good sleep. It's like that fantasy game where you wake up well rested. Yeah.
No, I love that. I think I'm gonna piggyback off this airline example, right? Like if you had a cheat code for just like traveling and being on an airline, the cheat code would be to have actual good food on an airline. That's not just like a tiny bag of chips. It's mostly air. So maybe like a real free snack that I don't have to pay for in first class. To get it. Then
But
I
you're
don't
the
have
only
to.
one. Nobody else gets it.
Yeah, that's right. No, everyone else is just jealous. That's why it's a cheat code. Thank you for humoring us, Eric. So we ask every person, who comes on the show, what your origin story is. How did you get involved in the hospitality industry? How did you make your first steps towards getting involved in, all this amazing spirits world and, everything in between? What was that first launching point for you that kind of drew you in and made this a career endeavor for you?
Yeah, so I think I have almost like a prequel that I think I'm going to save for the end.
Okay.
But the entry point, I think, for what we're going to be talking about today is really, oddly enough, it was two things that sort of happened together. One was I was wrapping up my MFA in poetry at the University of Maryland. So I have two unrelated degrees in the humanities, which, as you can assume, makes most people relatively unemployable. And I realized
same.
that
Have the same problem.
yeah. We went to the same place for undergrad, so maybe we should
Perfect.
we should
We
start
should
pointing
reach out to
fingers.
them. Maybe we should
Yeah.
go back to our alma mater and give them a speech on like, hey, you're gonna get a degree here. Here's what you can do that doesn't use your degree. They'll love that.
Yeah, we can do a joint podcast there at the Bullet Hole.
Yeah, perfect. That's the name of the little dining cafeteria at Gettysburg College where we went to school. So
Yeah.
give them a plug.
But so I went from Gettysburg, did psychology at Gettysburg, then went to the University of Maryland for my MFA in poetry, and they. It got to the point where they were like, "You're graduating, and we don't hate you. Would you like to stay on as an adjunct professor?" And I realized that my financial aid package to like get a free master's degree and like teach some classes on the side was actually more money than they were going to pay me once I earned said degree. So I was getting like a pay cut for an advanced degree. So I was like, well, no, we can't do that.
It's like becoming a manager in working in a restaurant.
Pretty much. Yeah, exactly. So I decided in my last semester that I was gonna just take a class in a completely separate like domain, and so I went outside of the university. I went to the Capital Wine School here in Washington D.C. I got my WSET 2 in, I think it's wines and spirits, but they might have just had like a little subsection on spirits. So mostly wine stuff.
Yeah.
And then while I was taking that course, my friend and roommate Ethan Hall, also Gettysburg College, shout out, was playing around with just making cocktail bitters. So we were living together in DC at that time, and he was doing like little kitchen mason jar cocktail bitters, and we were kind of playing around with those together, and we got them to the point where, we looked at each other and we said, well, this could be fun. We should make a company and do this. And so from there, we found like a commercial kitchen that kind of did some accelerator programs and joined the commercial kitchen, started making those out of a commercial kitchen as regulated under the FDA, because technically it's like a flavor extract. So you can do that. It's one of the ways you can do it. So we did that. And that kind of scaled into embitterment, which was we had 8 different cocktail bitters flavors, and that kind of got us into the conversations with bartenders in the DC area. We were also doing a lot of business with distilleries in DC, Maryland, and Virginia, as kind of like, we would go and they would sell our bitters out of their tasting rooms. They'd make cocktails with their spirits. It was kind of the real when the craft distilling boom was really at its peak, and that sort of kicked me off. I eventually quit my job and what I was doing, legal marketing, and tried to kind of make a go of it with the bitters thing. We launched the Modern Bar Cart podcast as like an educational platform, And that kind of is the momentum that has led to today, where I no longer have the bitters company because of so many economic factors, including distributor consolidation and pandemics and stuff like that, that make it really hard to
Also hard to sell things in
successfully.
drops.
Sell individual drops of something as a business model. So that didn't quite work out, but the podcast was the one real, kind of through line that kept on adding significant value. It's how I got hooked up with the American Distilling Institute and became a spirits judge. And now I'm still working with distillers, still working with bartenders, still, working with all the people who I met through that cocktail bitters company. But now I'm just doing it in a slightly different capacity and, trying to connect people and do cool stuff in the spirits and cocktail world.
That's what we love doing cool stuff with cool people. And shockingly enough, the hospitality industry has an endless amount of really cool people. So it's incredible. You mentioned becoming a spirits judge, and I do want to get there, but I think it's also important too to talk about your journey with the Modern Bar Cart podcast as well, too, right? You said it's been a through line through your entire career leading up to kind of where you are today, even. So how did the podcast change from how you created it to where you are today, right? Because things change over time. You bring on different guests, you acquire different guests. So how has it changed, and what has your vision been for the podcast over time?
Yeah, definitely. It started out as a sort of like a home bartending 101 type thing. So the 12, build your home bar. Here's how to make bitters at home. Here, do an episode on every spirit type, kind of get all that 101 content out of the way. And so what happened is once I was doing it once a week. So after about 52 weeks, after about a year, you're at roughly 50 episodes. And I started getting a little antsy at this point because, did the gin episode. Can't do that again. Did the milk punch episode. Can't do that again. I was like, all right. Am I running out of episodes? And so this is when I started trying to do a little bit more interview style content. The technology was just starting to get to the point where I could do a decent recording via like Skype. At that point, it wasn't even really Zoom. Zoom was even, kind of nascent at that point in like 2018, 2019. Yeah. So I was starting to play around with more interview content. And the first group of people you get in touch with, I learned, were authors. Because authors have to kind of promote their stuff. They really don't say no. So even if you,
it's good to know, John.
Yeah, fair.
Hot tip. One thing I started doing was just quarterly going onto the Amazon like new releases and just looking up, wine and beverages and seeing like who's got a new book coming out. Because I also had a bit of a background in SEO, and I knew at that point that I could rank if I was the first one to publish an episode with the exact title of that book, then my interview was going to pop when people started searching for that book. So it was one of my, kind of early on growth strategies, but it allowed me to kind of practice the interview content. And so the show definitely changed from more of a here's how to do spirits and cocktails 101 to more of like, all right, let's find some people who can get more into the special topics and the 201, 301, more advanced and intermediate content. And, I'm at the point now where I've, John, like you, I've got a couple of small organisms. Once you have a small organism running around in the background that has no freaking mic discipline, you gotta pick your shots with the podcast. So
those are called children, progeny.
Future barbacks.
Yeah, future barbacks in training.
Yeah. So I'm no longer doing it once a week. I'm doing it every 2 weeks. Is a volume where now that I'm approaching 300 episodes, I can keep it sustainable and most importantly keep the quality high. I as I've improved my interviewing skills, I've also tried to ask questions and talk about the subject matter in a way that's going to allow my guests to answer in a way that's not just, beating the constant drum that they're always drumming. I try to differentiate my podcast by being an interviewer who knows how to get the most out of every guest.
Right.
And those are the podcasts that I really enjoy listening to. So it's a natural way that I can try and make my show stand out. So like a couple that really jump out to me, like I did an interview. I was traveling to do my first judging stint at with the American Distilling Institute. They do it in Tiburon, right across the bay from San Francisco every year. So I flew out there, and while I was there, I went to St. George Spirits, and I got to interview Lance Winters, who's their master distiller.
Absolutely
And
amazing human.
that conversation to me still stands out. Like we actually did it face to face, but it stands out to me as like we were able to get into this groove with each other where I was just getting goosebumps, and he was like saying these things that were just setting me on fire, and I knew that was going to do the same thing for our listeners. And so that really helped me to kind of double down on the interview skills. And another great one is I had an interview with Ryan Chaithia-Wardena, who's from like Silver Lion, the whole Lioness,
Incredible cocktail bars.
That group. And again, just an incredible person, but I was able to really dig deep and ask questions about his creative process and how he helps his bar teams be creative, that nobody's ever published content like that with him. And so that's the angle that I try and take. And I think that's the way that the podcast has evolved to become over time.
No, of course. It's like whenever a guest walks into the bar and they go, "What's good here?" Right? It's what's the question behind the question, right? Whenever you're interviewing someone or talking to someone, you're looking for that. Okay, but why? How? When? Like, like getting really like into like the minutia of like how things change. And I think that that's really important to like bring things out of a guest, right? Like we wanted to hear about, like that was the impetus for you, right? Like having those interviews, those key interviews, change the way that you did interviews for everything moving forward. That's important context for people that have been listening to your show for over 300 episodes.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I mean, like I recently had a guest, and I sent interview questions, and this guest was just like really unimpressed. Whereas usually, and so I was like, whoa, like usually I get like a pretty favorable response. And so there's still even some moments where it's humbling, and, I have to be like, oh, nope, you can still do better at this.
Yeah, we can still grow, right? Like it's, you started as an education platform, not just, for your listeners, but also for you too, right? Like,
right.
How do you learn and grow? How do you, absorb all this information and then put it back out there in the world? So absolutely love that.
How do you feel about being in the hot seat now, John?
I love it.
Yeah, good.
I love being in the hot seat. All right. So you did mention becoming a spirits judge, and you threw back again to like the most recent one that you were doing. So I think that this is an important thing. How do you get into becoming a spirits judge? There's a lot of bartenders out there that have been doing this for, over 10 years, 12 years. And they're like, I'm ready for the next step. Maybe I don't want to be a manager. Maybe I don't want to be a consultant yet. Maybe I don't want to own my own business, but I'm looking to kind of network and expand. So how did you put your foot in the door and become a spirits judge? It's always good when you laugh at the start of a question.
I was at the dentist recently, and this is a digression. I will answer your question. I was at the dentist recently, and I was like, yeah, I'm like got a little like soreness here. Like I've got like a little tenderness up here. And he's like, well, do you grind your teeth? And I'm like, well, I don't think I grind my teeth. And he goes, well, let me put this another way. He's like, do you feel like you have some stress in your life right now? And I just busted out laughing. and he's got a big like LED or LCD TV, like where he's like typing notes, and he just types patient laughed.
And that's in your permanent record.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, maybe there's something to this. So I had that same question. Well, how do you become a spirits judge? This was one of those early book interviews. I was interviewing a gentleman by the name of David T. Smith from the UK. He has a book called The Gin Dictionary. I was like, great, let's talk. This was my gin episode, right? So I'm like, let's talk about this. He was gracious enough to come on. And at one point pre-recording, he said, oh, I'm sorry that I wasn't as responsive as I could be. I was running around Europe doing a bunch of spirits judging competitions. And remember, this is at that period where I was like, am I running out of stuff to talk about? And so initially, light bulb, I'm like, ooh, spirits judging. Let's talk about that. So it was a good, organic thing to kind of work into that conversation. And so we had a great interview. And then on the back end, he goes, he's a lovely British gentleman. He goes, oh, by the way, do you fancy maybe trying a hand at this judging thing? And I was like, yes, but it's not a thing you can you can't declare a spirits judging major. It's not like a set of electives and core curricula that you can just be like, all right, now I'm a spirits judge. Like, you can't sign up for your WSET and then just go straight into spirits judging. So I guess the answer is you got to know somebody, and the way to know somebody is to put yourself out there and do a little bit of networking. I would say that being a spirits judge does not pay anything. You get your costs covered at best.
At a good competition.
Yes. So you get your costs covered, but really, so what it is you got a network to do it. And then once you're there, you do more networking. You're meeting people who have self-selected like you to be really passionate about these things. If you're a specialist, so like great example would be the American Distilling Institute. They have a lot of people who specialize in whiskey or in brandy or, in a agave spirits, like particular categories. If you're a specialist, you're going to meet the other people who are the passionate specialists. If like me, you're more of a generalist. Now I tend to do, when I'm judging for them, I'll judge a lot of gin because David brought me in. I'll judge RTDs because I've got the cocktail background. And so I'll, just kind of slot in where they need me. I've done rum on a number of occasions, which I love judging because it's such a diverse category. And I've done, just some oddball. They always work in some oddball flights. Everybody has to chip away at the vodka. Everybody starts their day with vodka. Everybody ends their judging sessions with the heavy palate buster cream liqueurs and nocinos and stuff like that. So everybody kind of gets a taste of everything. But whether you're a specialist who wants to meet other specialists, or more of like, I'd consider myself like a journalist and an educator, I guess, compared to like a distiller. It gives me a great opportunity to meet all these specialists and, say, hey, how can I, as a generalist, work together with you as a specialist, have them on the show. And it's kind of that benevolent cycle that it's not something you can program. But if your goal is to be a spirits judge, then I would say networking and trying to put yourself in spaces with people who also care deeply about that thing is the way to do it.
No, that's fantastic. This is a question too, because I've done a bunch of spirits judging as well. What's your go-to way to avoid palate fatigue whenever you're tasting, tons of spirits over a couple days?
I don't struggle too much with palate fatigue. I think probably because I spent so much time making bitters and just blasting myself with gin.
just inundated. You're just immune to it now.
Yeah, it's like good luck trying to scare me away. I would say for me the biggest culprits are proof. I feel like the whiskey people suffer more from palate fatigue than the rest of us because they've got the
barrel proof,
often like the barrel proof, and then some, and then like you'll get some like tannin bombs where not the royal tannin bombs, but some bombs of tannins, where the stewards. So like you just had recently Justin from Bevfluence on your show. One of the things that he does for ADI is they essentially prejudge everything and then blind everything and put them into flights. And the way you arrange a flight is, if you've got a whiskey that is just completely over extracted and not very good and hot, well, at least you can do the judges the favor of putting that at the end of the flight, so that at least the other whiskeys in that flight don't have to suffer from you having just blasted out with all that kind of grossness. Because everybody who pays does get judged, so we got to judge them all. So that's one strategy for avoiding palate fatigue, or at least minimizing the effects on all of it. But yeah, I'd say proof point for me, sometimes after a flight of Navy strength gins, I'll need to go and do like a water mouthwash and take down some of those delicious water crackers that they always have.
Oh, so delicious. They really dry the palate. This is a really great segue into talking about our next topic, but you talked about these flavor bombs at the beginning of a flight maybe, and it can ruin an offset. You've also been a cocktail competition judge, and just as well as I do that sometimes the first person that goes has a spicy jalapeno drink or a ghost pepper drink, and every other cocktail for the rest of the competition has been bombarded. So it's important to kind of stage and make sure that everything flows whenever you're doing those flights. So important. And shout out to the people behind the scenes, because it's not possible without them always. But let's jump into the cocktail competitions. You've been a judge. I know we're going to talk a little bit about you hosting your own, but how did you get your foot in the door now judging these cocktail competitions, that you've been doing for a couple years?
Yeah, so I started as more of like I started weirdly in like the event space. So like when we had the Bitters Company, there would be markets and events like festivals, for example. So like Taste of DC, or another big one was Emporium, kind of like a foodie event. Yeah. So the nice thing about these events is that we would, as a vendor, they would just buy liquor license, like umbrella liquor licenses for the entire event. And as long as we got the COI insurance to cover them, then we could slot in under their liquor license, which didn't cost us anything. So I just get the COI, and then we would be able to sell cocktails in a way that our business licensing didn't really allow us. We had a catering license, but not an alcoholic catering license.
Right.
So
you have to have both to kind of work in tandem there. So
yeah. So that put me in the position of like, all right, you're shaking up cocktails for all these people at events, and the event organizers would have inevitably come to me and be like, hey, like, we want to like do like a little side cocktail. We don't bring in some bartenders, or, hey, can you come up on the main stage and like shake some drinks with some of the like teach some of the people here how to make a drink on stage or something. So I ended up like, one of the events, I remember Hendrix had like a big booth. And so Eric Anderson there, I think he's like their national brand rep here or he's at least their New York brand rep. He was down. So I got to meet the Hendrix kind of like US brand guy. And we did like a little collaboration for Taste of DC. So it was just kind of like getting my foot in with almost like MC and crowd work surrounding cocktails. Sure. There were a couple of little like small competitions that we participated in. I remember we won a cocktail competition it was just like a People's Choice thing at some random event at the National Building Museum downtown. And just, getting a little bit involved with some of the events with the DC Craft Bar Guild. They have their Repeal Day Ball every year that I attended for a few years, kind of got to see how that worked behind the scenes. And eventually I started working with distillers. So there's a couple of distilleries that, like Catoctin Creek out in Virginia, had some events where they had me come and cover it for the podcast. McClintock Distilling in Frederick, Maryland brought me in to help them with a charity event that they do. So I've done that 3 times with them before and after COVID, and just hands on the ground, like, all right, what would make this a success? They all kind of look a little bit different depending on the venue, the stakeholders, the crowd size, the bartenders who are participating. So it was just a good little kind of gradual build to eventually giving a seminar on it at the ADI conference like August 2022. And did a couple of case studies from like digital competitions that I've seen as well. So I'd never run a digital competition at that point, but I was able to get in touch with my friend Derek Sandhouse from Ming River Baijiu and talk about like a really successful competition that they did. And that's how I finally parlayed my way into the Virginia Cocktail Games, which is probably what we'll talk about next.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because you've talked about this wide range of experiences that you've had, whether it's, hopping up, being an MC, directing the flow, or, sitting down and actually judging these drinks or helping with the organization of them. Right. And it's not very often that everybody gets to hit all of those areas, even if they're not at the same time. So I'm sure bringing all of your experiences together across those competitions is what led you to the Virginia Cocktail Games. So what was the inception? How was the first conversation? There are a lot of people, that like to host cocktail competitions at their bar, right? I've seen a whole bunch of local competitions and things like that over the years with a specific brand. But how do you go about just starting those conversations to like, how do I host one? Let's start there at the basic, especially specifically for the Virginia Cocktail Games.
Yeah, well, I have to shout out Virginia Spirits, the Virginia Spirits Board. It's they're a great organization, and they approached me like the the director came up to me like as I was like trying to like get all my, because I recorded that for the podcast, so I was like stuffing audio gear into my bag trying to get off the stage so the next person could present. And so I met the director for the Virginia Spirits Board marketing office. And that was the first conversation. It was as I was retreating from the stage after giving that seminar. And there's a couple of different types of cocktail competitions. There's, broadly speaking, the digital competitions, which are your social media run competitions. There's the local competitions. A great one here in DC is the Ricky competition that the DC Craft Bar Guild does every year. I think they're on their like 15th year of doing the Ricky competition.
I've seen it pop up all the time on social media, so it's been a while.
So good. So local competitions held at local bars or local distilleries. That's like the one that I would do with McClintock Distilling every year. They'd bring in the best bartenders in the Frederick area, and they would compete, luckily for charity. So it was, and then finally there's like the big leagues that I think of, like Diageo World Class, as you well know, Drink Masters, these kind of like large supranational and international platforms that have multiple layers of vetting, multiple kinds of applications. You got several rounds. You could maybe lump Speed Rack into that, something like that, where it kind of goes on tour.
Presence for sure.
Yeah. So that's kind of how I think of the big buckets of cocktail competitions. And really, when I was working with Virginia Spirits, the conversation was, what are we trying to get here? What are we trying to do? And they're a reasonably new organization, because Virginia, as a control state, they have some interesting laws. Like, so one real noteworthy difference between Virginia and other states is that there is no wholesale of liquor from distributors to bars. Bars in Virginia pay MSRP for their spirits. And a good chunk of that large margin that they're missing actually goes back to funding education and marketing initiatives for Virginia distillers. So the nice thing, even though there's this kind of really unfortunate thing where they're not getting their margins, at least we can, if we're smart about it, as I'm embodying Virginia Spirits as like a state entity right now. If we're smart with the way we deploy those resources that we get, we can give back to these bars, restaurants, bartenders, and distillers that are doing these great cocktails. So
people that need it the most too, right? Like that's the important thing, and getting it into the hands of people that can do things with it.
Yeah. So broadly speaking, their goal is they just wanted to raise everybody's profile. They'd never done it before, and there's certain legal constraints. For example, like distillers can't promote specific bars or bartenders, otherwise that like violates some certain tied house laws, so-called. So that there were certain like little things that I had to learn about what was and was not possible, specifically in the Commonwealth of Virginia. But once we got that once we figured that out and were able to work with Virginia ABC, their like state-run liquor entity, we were able to create a 2-round cocktail competition where we started off with a digital round. So bartenders applied via just a Google form. We kept it entirely free to apply. You just needed to submit a concept. You didn't even need to have your spec completely measured. Like if you wanted to, you could send us your recipe. But you know what? if your spec is, they would be able, if they were accepted into the, if they made it into that first round, we made it clear that they would still have time to work on your spec. So you didn't even have to go to the liquor store and blow money on a bottle if you weren't sure.
That's cool. That's really cool. Because a lot of times you have to have a recipe, you have to have a picture of the drink, which guess what? Most bartenders aren't professional photographers. And when that gets judged, sometimes it makes it unfair, right? Like there's a whole bunch of different bias that goes into this.
Well, and
that's really cool.
Let me say that, like, so going into this, very similar to like my role when I was kind of like the MC for the McClintock Distilling bartender competition, my job was to take care of the bartenders. It was always making sure that I could say with confidence that the bartenders were taken care of, because you're out of your element. You're at a different venue. You're doing stuff differently than you normally do. Your mise en place is different. You're probably rolling in late, like let there at least be one person there who's looking out for you. And so I kind of took that mindset into the Virginia cocktail games. And it's like, listen, at the end of the day, it's the Virginia Spirits Board marketing office. These are marketing people. They're not bartenders. They don't necessarily know how to talk to bartenders. And the one thing I really tried to drive home and really make my priority one was taking care of the bartenders, because as the first year of this competition, as soon as bartenders don't feel like they're being valued and taken care of, like the well is poisoned. And I wanted to make sure that every step of the way I was trying to do something to make sure that they understood, yes, we want content from you, for example, for the digital portion of the competition. Like, yes, if we accept you into this digital round, we want you to take pictures and videos of a cocktail, but I'm going to send you some nice lighting stuff. So we sent them a little care package, for the 25 bartenders across 5 regions of Virginia that made it to that digital round. We actually sent them stuff. I sent them a copy of a really awesome new cocktail book by Dr. Kevin Peterson called Cocktail Theory. That's like, great. Have you never developed your own cocktail? Like, this book will walk you through the creative process of developing a cocktail. Do you not know how to take pictures? Great. I'm going to send you Jordan Hughes's PDF on the most important things to consider when photographing cocktails. I'm going to send you like a tripod for your phone so that it's stabilized. So we tried to, even though we were asking them to do these things that are slightly above and beyond, I wanted to make sure that we were giving them resources to make sure that they actually had a little bit of confidence that they could do that well, especially for that digital round, because most bartenders hate digital cocktail competitions, even if they choose to compete in them, because you're basically being farmed for content, and it's not a great feeling.
Yeah, because a lot of the times too, like in online submission, you get 5,000 people that apply. Guess what? The brand now owns those 5,000 recipes, and you're getting farmed for all of their social media campaigns for the next 10 years. So like, a lot of people don't read the fine print. So it's really cool to see that you went above and beyond to give back to the bartenders, because that gets missed in 99% of competitions.
Yeah. Well, and to make it so approachable too, I just feel like would encourage the participants to really want to give it their all, because they do feel taken care of in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, that was the idea. And I had to, kind of manage expectations on the other end too, because it's like, listen, you're going to have X amount of bartenders apply. You're only going to accept 25. So already you've pissed off all those other people. Let's at least make sure we don't piss off the 25. And by the way, when you make the cut for the finals, and we have our 5 finalists, guess what? There's going to be 20 other people who are pissed off that they're not the finalists. So it's like, wow, in the process of trying to get to our end goal, we've at least partially alienated a decent sized chunk of people. So we need to make sure we're doing the work so that, at least they come out with a neutral to perhaps slightly positive feeling if they don't move on to the next round. I think that's important from like just a public sentiment standpoint.
No, of course. And, like, ultimately the goal of a competition is to win. Like obviously you can win a competition without actually winning it. We talk about this in several of our episodes, that you could just be an amazing public speaker and you get connected with a brand, or hey, like maybe someone in the crowd was watching you and you got a new gig as a lead bartender somewhere, right? All of those things are very important, but at the end of the day, someone's going to win. That's a real factor, and everyone else is going to lose. So you mitigating that right from the start, huge.
Now, John, hold on. I thought you've said multiple times that you don't have to win a cocktail competition to win the cocktail competition.
Of course, I just said it, and I feel like that too. Like one of the reasons, like I do competitions, and I'm very transparent about this, is to learn. Every time I do a competition, I try a new technique, I try a new flavor, I try a new infusion, and a lot of times I don't make it past the first or second round because my thought is way too weird and it just doesn't fit the parameters. But I learned something. Even if I don't make it past the first round or the second round, doesn't matter. The competition has been basically used in totality for me. So every person has different objectives when they do this. Sometimes someone just wants to win $1,000. Gonna be real honest with you. Like sometimes that's the prize. They're gonna go all out just to be able to maybe pay their rent. Like that's important. Really important. Okay, so you have 25 bartenders in the Virginia Cocktail Games. What was the process to narrow it down from there to the next step?
Yeah, so it was an online voting mechanism, and on the one hand, I'm skeptical of any sort of people or crowd choice type thing, because you have to walk that really fine line between gamification, where you encourage people to try and stuff the vote box, while also employing mechanisms to make sure that people don't stuff the vote box. So you want to try and drive lots of votes without driving spam votes. And so we were able to, they have a great technical team. They were able to use a really great like online voting platform and build it right into their website. And I mean, luckily, it was the first time for us, but luckily the people who won the People's Choice voting were the ones who were the most bought in. They were the ones who were pounding the pavement on their friends and family to vote every day. And, of course, the goal for Virginia Spirits was to get emails for their email list and to get social media subscribers. But again, they're using those emails and those social media subscribers to promote Virginia distillers and Virginia bars and stuff like that. So they're doing good stuff with it. And at the end of the voting, it took place sort of like in concordance with the Summer Olympics. So we ran it for whatever the 11 days of that was. And at the end, we had very clear winners in terms of the digital votes. And those 5 people then converged on Richmond in September. We had them create entirely new cocktails because there was an Olympic theme at first, and the Olympics are over by September. So it's sort of a non sequitur if we're drinking Olympic cocktails in September. So we gave them a bit more of a general prompt, sort of Virginia centric. We opened up the number of spirits. We basically, the digital round, they were using spirits from their region of Virginia. So northern, coastal, central, western, or southern. And in the final round, we were like, you know what? Any Virginia spirit goes. We had them pick a hero product. So, you could use your Camparis or whatever, but you had to have a hero product from Virginia and kind of
must use 1 ounce, 1.25 ounce in the cocktail minimum to showcase it. Or
And the nice thing with the final cocktails is I actually there were only 5 bartenders, so I got to, as the consultant, right? I just said, open office hours. My email and my phone is open to you. I will workshop your cocktail. And I was able to, with every one of them, have a conversation, multiple conversations where it's like, jump on a call and I say, listen, I love you all equally. We're going to have this conversation right now, and I'm going to give you advice so that if you follow this advice and, we're going to do this hopefully to make you win. Now, you have to understand that I'm going to have this same conversation with the other 4 people. But I was able to kind of, serve as a second set of eyes on their drink specs and help them navigate that more general prompt in a way that gave them a path to success, in a way that helped them pick up the through line of their story, so that they could do a good job presenting it to the judges. So, that was one of the other ways that I could help take care of these bartenders, as we got ready for that final round. And in that final round, they had to present to a panel of judges. So we had an amazing bar director from Richmond, Just Singh. We had a food and drink historian from Virginia, Johnson & Wales trained. And then we had a master blender from Virginia Distillery, Amanda Beckwith, who is just has an amazing palate. She does all the blending for them. So we had a panel of judges that represented the distilling side, the sort of like cocktail and food history side, and then also like the technical, I run a bar program side of things. And then we also had a people's choice component where we kind of weighed each, the judges were, I think they got 100 points. They got evaluated on a 100-point scale from each of the judges. And then I think every people's choice vote counted for like a fifth of a point. So for every 5 people for your cocktail, you got an additional point tacked on to your total. So the people's choice vote was sort of like weighted in a way that it was like, well, yes, can you move the needle by crushing the people's choice? Yeah, but you're also still going to have to crush the judges side of thing in order to.
It's like getting bonus points on your test in class, right? Like
exactly.
how can I add something here?
Exactly.
Was that a like an actual like tasting room experience where everyone who was attending the competition that you were there for like could walk around with chips and drop everything off and taste all the drinks?
Yeah, basically, we did it we piggybacked on another event called Virginia Distilled at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, which is a beautiful venue. And so we had the judging private from like 2 to 4. And then at 5 o'clock, we opened up the room and they all had a station and everyone got 1 token to drop so that you could vote for your favorite. And we had a prep kitchen right next door. So they were all batching. So was it stressful of having them like come and make 4 really beautiful cocktails, 3 for the judges and 1 for photography, and then turn around and batch for hundreds of people? Yeah. But that was also part of the work that I did was, I did the whole batching spreadsheet and, we sourced all the stuff for them so that when they rolled up at noon that day, they were able to just dump bottles, get their stuff batched, did a lemon acid instead of squeezing 2 cases of lemons, and away we went.
That's incredible too, because a lot of times when you do those tasting competitions, you're responsible for bringing all of your ingredients too. And like the fact that you're able to source it for these contestants, big. Because I mean, we talk about this all the time as bartenders doing competitions. Sometimes there's an expense that comes with it. It's not cheap to buy all these bottles and to buy all the ingredients, make syrups, make tinctures, all of it. And you've given them those tools the entire way through. That's not really heard of. So it's incredible to see that, you have taken the bartenders at the heart of the conversation and taking care of them. So I love that. That's great.
Yeah, I'll definitely feel a little bit better when I'm paying for that higher price drink in Virginia next time.
Yeah.
It really does. It really they call them licensees, bars and restaurants. They're from a liquor standpoint, they're called licensees, and the licensees really they absorb that margin because the drink prices are they high? Yeah. In Richmond, yeah. In Northern Virginia around DC, yeah, they're high, but no higher than in DC, where they have wholesale. So really it is the venues absorbing that cost and not the consumers, thankfully. But yeah, there is a price to pay.
That's crazy. All right. So obviously they're the winner. I'd love to hear a little bit about the winner, the cocktail they made. What was their presentation like? Give us some details for them. Let's give them a shout out because they went through this whole process that you created, and they deserve to get their name out there a little bit.
Absolutely. Shout out to Henry Hill Jr. Out of Roanoke. He is a bar manager at the Hotel Roanoke in Roanoke. And he created a cocktail called No Place Like Home. And, really the prompt that we asked them was like, why did you choose Virginia? There's not, nobody has a gun to your head saying you got to live and work here. Like, what does this state mean to you? And, tell us a story using the native flavors of this place. And Henry created a very complex, I'll be honest. And Henry, I love you. But while we were workshopping this drink, I was not entirely certain that it was going to come together in the way that it did, right up until I tasted it. In fact, he did almost like an upside down Vesper type thing with so he had a vodka and a gin. Obviously, he sort of subbed in mead for the Lillet, and
Interesting.
then like ended up using some like hibiscus and some other crazy stuff, and then for a completely non-vesper turn, there was some aquafaba in there, right? So we've got almost like an upside down vesper with these bright floral notes and some honey notes from the mead and this beautiful hibiscus or this beautiful aquafaba silky texture to it. And all the while, I think the real magic with Henry was all as he was building this drink, he was able to weave in the story of all of his personal connections to these ingredients, and he just did a really beautiful job paying homage to his family and to his ties to Virginia. And the judges completely fell in love with it. The drink was way more balanced and delicious than I thought it would be. And I think all of those things were even amplified in the People's Choice round, where, one quick tip for anybody who has to win a People's Choice vote is the longer you can keep people at your station and at your table by telling a compelling story, the more they have a sunk cost of like, damn, I spent all this time there. Like you kind of
It's
like,
real.
it's weighted in your brain of like the person that you spend the most time with is the one that you're most connected to and the one that you're most likely to drop that token for. And Henry is just a wonderful storyteller and such a charming guy that I think all of those things combined to put him in the winner's circle. But that said, I mean, it was really tight actually. Shout out to Amanda Liebrick out of Norfolk, who also was right there neck and neck with him. She had a great cocktail as well. It really all five finalists we got. It was an incredibly diverse group, and it was an incredibly qualified group, and not all of them absolutely aced the judges side of things, and which is fair. If it's your first cocktail competition and you got 3 people staring at you silently, it's an intimidating thing. So
It's terrible. I still get terrified. I've been doing it for years. Like it's real.
Yeah. So not everybody like got an A++ on the judges side. There's like lots of room for improvement in certain ways, but like what I loved is that going into, I was like, wow, look how diverse this group is. Just based on like, this is based on a People's Choice vote. I didn't have any say in this. This is organically what the people of Virginia said is we want this diverse group of people to represent our regions. And they came in and they showed out so well. It was just a complete pleasure to see. So we're going to do for sure this coming year. We'll do another Virginia Cocktail Games. It might take place at a slightly different time of year. It might look a little bit different. We're actively surveying our participants for feedback right now so we can improve it. But there will be another Virginia Cocktail Games.
Which is huge. Listen to the people that went through the process. Like so many of these competitions live in a void where like they just do the same thing every single year. And while that's fine, you know that there are, parameters that stay the same. Listening to your actual competitors, incredible. And they feel invested in the program. Like if they apply next year and then they see something that they asked for that happened, they're bought in entirely, even if they don't win.
Well, and what I tell all my bartenders is like great example was the cup size, right? So like, here's a great case study for you. For the People's Choice round, they're like, well, what size cups do you want? I'm like, can we get 3 ounces? Like, I'm thinking of the Tales of the Cocktail cups, right?
Yeah, the little tiny tasters.
Well, guys, yeah. And so they're like, 3 ounces, that's tiny. We'll never be able to reuse these. I'm like, well, but like the bartenders are going to want 3 ounces because they were half serves for the People's Choice.
Right.
So nobody's doing like, you'd have to have a 6-ounce drink not to be able to fit in that cup, which is not happening. So I'm like, get us the 3 ounces. And they're like, nah, I don't know. I think we want this size cup. And then I got an email from one of the bartenders who's like, I'm worried about the size of the cups. It's going to be too big for my drink. I'm like, yes, sent that to him. And then I got those 3-ounce cups. So I'm like, bartenders, listen, if you don't feel like you're listened to, the consultant is also never listened to. so give me the fuel. Give me something to point to so I can say, yes, the bartenders need this, and help me help them. So I love it. I love it when they give feedback and don't just suffer silently.
No, it's true. All right. So you said you're going to do this one next year. What other things do you have on the horizon that you're working on? Any other fun projects that people can, kind of tune in for?
Oh yeah. Got some spirits judging stuff coming up. And I've just been doing a little bit of brand work too on the spirit side. I just did an event with a distillery client to kind of like not do a rebrand, but sort of help them do a little bit of export work. There's a cool conference called Vin Expo that just came to Virginia, and I helped out one of my distiller friends there, kind of showing them the ropes of how to revamp some tasting notes and present the collection for export in a way that kind of made sense to these buyers from other countries. So that was a cool thing that I just got to do. With Virginia, we're looking into launching a spirits competition just specifically for Virginia producers. So I'll be helping out on that end, using my experience from ADI and beyond. And there is a fun spirits collaboration project that may happen that I can't say too much about, but our country is about to turn 250 years old. And so there may be some collaborative spirits projects in a certain state or commonwealth that may occur in celebration of that 250th anniversary. So that might be something that I get involved in down the road. And so yeah, I've got plenty of projects, considering 2 kids running around that I got to wrangle. I've got plenty of fun spirits judging and conferences and outside projects to keep me busy. But that and the podcast are really what's got me excited right now. I've got episode 300 coming up. So I don't know. I'm thinking
Almost
maybe
there.
I try to get like Dave Arnold or somebody big with something to promote.
Oh, absolutely. And they're incredible on these podcasts too. Like whenever they're there as guests, we had, Dale DeGroff last year on the show. Love the guy.
Sweet.
Absolutely incredible. Like, it's so cool. Like, I think this is really rare in the hospital or in any other industry, that whenever you get like heroes, people you've looked up to on a podcast, they actually live up to all those expectations because they're real. They're the side that they're showing you to the social media is also who they are. And that's why the hospitality industry is magical, right? Everyone, for the most part, is who they are. And you get genuine interactions from them. And that is so cool.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. I have a question for you before we get to our final question. I'm throwing this one in there. You open the door. And this is going to be good. So for our listeners, whenever we invite a guest on the show or they reach out to us, we send them a little questionnaire talking about topics that they would like to discuss and features. Well, Eric did us the favor of mentioning something about Bigfoot. And this is a hot take. You open the door. I'm kicking it down the whole way. I heard you have some sort of sentiments towards, YouTube Bigfoot documentaries, and you have a hot take on this.
Yeah, so I've never been one who enjoys like reality TV. I generally don't like empty carbs TV. I do like addictive TV. I like the shows that are not necessarily high art, but that have like the compelling addictive storylines. But there needs to be a story there for me. It can't just be like, sorry to throw you under the bus, but Bravo might as well not exist as a channel for me. It does absolutely nothing for me. But what I did discover is the wonderful world of YouTube Bigfoot documentaries. I don't even know how I came across this stuff. Actually, I do. Survivor Man. Survivor Man did a Bigfoot season. That was my gateway drug. So I was like, oh, all right. So I'll watch this. And so there are these, basically it's people who go out into the woods looking for Bigfoot. Spoiler alert, we haven't found him.
What? Are you serious? Honestly, between now and when this episode goes live, I hope that somebody finds him.
All right. Well, so I'm skeptical that it's being kept under wraps via a government conspiracy, because there's a certain person who jumps to mind who I could see, like, if Bigfoot truly existed, this person who would have access to that knowledge would have absolutely dropped that on stage by now. That's too good not to share with the American people, right? But what I do love about these Bigfoot documentaries is that they try so hard, and they try like so they put so much effort into being scientific and remaining skeptical, but by the end, right, we're still telling a story. This is still YouTube. You still have to create some sort of narrative. In the end, all of these Bigfoot documentaries end up being, you know what? It's all about the friends we made along the way.
This is like an episode of Pokemon.
It's sort of heartwarming because you end up feeling for these people of being like, well, damn, they didn't find him again. Once again, he remains elusive. But if you made a friend along the way, was it really that much of a waste of time? No. And as the viewer, you're like, okay, closure. Good.
We didn't find Bigfoot, but we do have big hearts.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's too early in the morning for me for this stuff.
That's my guilty pleasure.
Is it just Bigfoot, or have you branched out into other, cryptids and mythical beasts? Loch Ness Monster, Wendigo. Wendigo? I'm saying it wrong, I think.
Yeah. The big ones that often accompany on these channels would be like Dogman, and so essentially kind of like werewolf, or the glowing orbs, and high strangeness, especially in like the Appalachian region. So yeah, a little bit of branching,
Yeah, we've got a ghost light out here. Sorry, go on, John.
My guilty pleasure is the Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch. I get sucked in every time. When the History Channel made the move from showing less history to all of these color commentary shows, sometimes it gets you. You find yourself an hour later going, huh, wow, that was an episode. Where'd my day go?
I don't know if you're familiar with the Y-Files, but he does a lot of stuff, and he presents it really well to where he dives completely into the lore or the conspiracy or whatever it is, and then he kind of backs it up at the end and says, so what do we actually know is true? There's a really good one on Mothman. There's no friends made along the way, but it's a really, really good one.
No friends, I'm out.
Yeah.
Sorry, if they don't become friends, I don't want to watch it, Mike. No, okay. So last real question for you, and we ask everyone on the show. What is your favorite shift, your favorite moment in the hospitality industry, that you kind of remember as like, this is it, this is why I do this?
So this story has a little bit of something for everyone. It's like I said, it's the prequel story. It's got tragedy, it's got failure, it's got redemption. So
friends at the end.
In fact, yes, indeed. Yeah. So John, I don't know if you recall or ever had passed through during your time at Gettysburg College, a little town known as Biglerville.
Just once, but it was a blur, and I can't talk about everything that made it a blur. So
okay, fair enough. Well, it's the home of the Musselman's applesauce factory. But this was the summer before my senior year at Gettysburg. I had just gotten back from doing a study abroad, and I was working a Mellon grant on campus just for some psychology project that I was doing. And so my advisor, I walked into his office one day, and just to do like the hey check-in type thing. He's like, hey, listen, my daughter is 8 months pregnant, and she needs somebody to take over her server job at this place in Biglerville. Can you help me out with this? And so I said, yeah, sure. Like it's
sure,
money.
why not?
I'm just sitting here on campus spending maybe an hour or two a day doing this thing. So yeah, of course. So go out to Biglerville. It's this little place called Pomona's, which was like a bakery by day. And then in the evening, this chef came in. He was a young guy at the time. He was only 28 years old, 2 kids and a third on the way. They had a wood-fired oven, and that's where he did all the cooking over coals on a wood-fired oven. 28 seats in the restaurant, BYO. And this guy was churning out this amazing, like northern Spanish style Galician cuisine. It was really punching above its weight. It was really innovative for 2010.
Yeah, wow, no, that's incredible for 2010.
In Biglerville, Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
right?
And
like
28 seats, coal fire. So like that's crazy.
Yeah. And so I was the lone server. There was me, a busser, and a prep cook, and the busser and the prep cook were basically like high school dropout kind of kids. Like they were just like, local towny type kids who were like 14 or 15, like clearly this was a big thing for them. So it really had no reason to exist. So I learned a lot about, this is where, my first service industry job, I learned how to be a server essentially. And then I remember at one point during the summer, I was complaining, cause it was a slow night. It was like a Tuesday or something. It was, it was a slow night and I was like not making the tips that I wanted. And the chef looked over at me and like his tired, like chef, but also father of 2 young children kind of way. He just looks at me and he goes, you make more money than I do, right? And I was like, oh no. And I didn't realize this guy, like, he was sort of like renting out this space from the baker, and the baker was giving him like a paycheck, like a small paycheck. It was not a good situation financially for this guy, but he was churning out this amazing food. And I just felt so horrible that shitty little me bitching about my lack of tips that I didn't really need, had kind of like wounded this guy. I was like, or at least frustrated him in this way. And so I was like, God, like, that's not good. That was not chill of me. So I went to the liquor store the next day before my next shift. And I was like, I think he likes bourbon. What do I get him? Reached for the Maker's Mark because it looked fancy, but was affordable, had the nice little red wax seal on it. Brought it in, said, Sean, I'm sorry. Like, forgive me for, running my mouth about, my tips. Here's a bottle of bourbon. And he said, great. He took off the seal, took a swig, and then popped it in the freezer. And then he went and he made a syrup, and he told me to go out into the garden in front and pick some mint. And he put the syrup and the mint in the bottle, shook it up, stuck it in the freezer. And then that night after that shift, we pulled some chairs out into the parking lot under the pergola, and he gave me my first mint julep, and that was my first cocktail.
Cool.
So it was kind of like a little redemption cocktail. And, that was kind of the drink that started it all.
Yeah, he shared something special with you too. Like, because if he just did that on the fly, that's not real. He's been doing that for a long time. He was just waiting for someone, and he pulls that out of the freezer. But no, I think you said a lot of things that really connect everybody in the hospitality industry, right? People that find their homes in restaurants. You talked about the 2 local kids, right? That happens in every restaurant across the United States. We've all worked with those people. We've all encouraged them. We've all empowered them, and also helped get them to the next step in their career too, if they stay. Like, that's real. The moment where someone has a tough night and they complain about their tips to the kitchen, and the kitchen's woefully underpaid in every restaurant too. Like, that's real, but we've all experienced those moments and then had those awesome moments whenever it closes that we share together and have a drink in the parking lot. Like, that's probably the most real in restaurants. So we love asking this question because it shows how connected we all are, and it doesn't really matter where you are. Someone has a similar story to you and you can bond with them. Like, that's what's important. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. All right, Mike, I think it's the end of the episode, huh? So I think we should do some shout outs. We always toss it to our guests first. Where can they find you? Where can they find your projects? Maybe some people like in your area that you want to give some love to.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can find me on any podcast app at the Modern Bar Cart Podcasts. Nice orange logo. Can't miss it. Episodes roughly bi-weekly. You can find me on the social medias at Modern Bar Cart and at Quixologist. That's QUIXologist, and modernbarcart.com. Directfireconsulting.com is where I keep sort of a portfolio of my work, list of my current and past clients. So you can check out the people I've worked with. I'll be adding case studies up there for the Virginia Cocktail Games and some of the other projects that I'm working on as well. So that's how you can find me. Also do want to shout out the finalists of the Virginia Cocktail Games. Of course, the winner, Henry Hill Jr., as well as Bree Carr, Julieta Hernandez, Melanie Holmes, and Amanda Liebrich. And I mentioned this earlier. Dr. Kevin Peterson has this amazing book called Cocktail Theory. This is just a hot tip as well as a shout out. This is a self-published book, but it's actually one of the best books about cocktails I've ever picked up. I have an opinion that it is probably one of the 3 most important cocktail books that will come out this decade in terms of advancing how people think about constructing cocktails. So I highly recommend you look that up. Because it's self-published, he actually benefits when you purchase it. He has a great bar called Castalia in Detroit, which also doubles as a fragrance store by day. So he's in the perfumery and cocktail game himself.
We actually had Jasmine Weaver, the Bardstown National Brand Ambassador, on the show while we were at the Elevate conference, and she worked at that bar with Dr. Kevin Peterson. And so, I had listened to your episode because you brought him on the Modern Bar Card to talk about the book. We had the interview with her. Everything came full circle. It's incredible. Everything that they're doing as far as cocktails, I think you hit the nail on the head. One of the most important of this decade. Like, absolutely get after it. Really cool book. So I want to make sure that I'm putting an exclamation point on that recommendation.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is people who go through traditional publishers have publicists who are pounding the pavement and trying to get you placed on podcasts. I saw that he was publishing that book and said, come on. He doesn't have a publicist, so he's kind of working from a little bit behind, but the quality is really there. Also want to shout out my buddy Mike Vanderhorn, who's given me a ton of great info on cocktail competitions. He's been on the podcast a couple of times. He's at cocktail.complex. And if you're interested in cocktail competitions, he has a channel on his Instagram at cocktail.complex that when a new competition or a deadline for a competition gets announced, you'll get a little ping on there. So that's a free way for you to just subscribe to a little set of reminders and promos on all the best and newest cocktail competitions that are on there. A couple of friends in the booze world I want to shout out are Reese Sims, who's the creator of Flavor Camp up in Canada. So if you want to maybe improve your spirits tasting skills, talking about becoming a spirits judge, check out Flavor Camp. She has a lot of great resources for helping you to go from sort of zero to hero in terms of your ability to perceive and identify and describe flavors in distilled spirits. Tracy Franklin is also a wonderful spirits educator. I think she might have been at that Bartender Elevate conference. I heard you talking about Tracy.
And we got an email in our inbox to do a little virtual recording with her. So
I love it. Tracy is amazing. So hopefully a future interview on the bartender journey or the Bardtenders.
Also another fantastic podcast.
And then so that's pretty much it from my shout outs, boys. Thank you. I want to shout you out for spending your time and let me run a couple minutes over here.
No, this is amazing.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Sam.
It's nice actually recording one during the day, having a cup of coffee in the morning. So this is kind of awesome. Mike, shout outs for you today.
I want to shout out the Tale of the Telling. I don't know where this episode will be released and, alongside with that, but we finally get to start playing D&D. I'm really excited. I know it's a podcast, but it's so hard to find a group of people to consistently play with. And now I've got that in my life. So I'm very excited for that.
Yeah. At the time of this recording, we'll start recording campaign 2 in 2 days, which is really, really exciting. This will come out, probably in late January, as far as episodes go, because we had some amazing interviews at the Elevate conference. So if you haven't listened to any of those yet, jump in there. Incredible people, incredible stories. So make sure you jump in, like Jasmine Weavers that we just mentioned as well.
She was great to talk to. Yeah,
such a cool story, and the way that she just develops flavors, I love it. Shout outs for me. It's to No Offense, Eric. My favorite podcast is called Bardtenders. You're probably listening to it or watching it right now on YouTube. You can check us out on social media at Bardtenders. You can check out our website at www.bardtender.com. Amazing free education for you there. Free resources for mental and physical wellness. Jump in. We like to break down the doors when it comes to, gatekeeping. It shouldn't exist, so everything should be for free. Get in there. We want you guys to have access to it. And of course, if you want to reach out to us, you can find us at contact@bardtender.com or slide into our DMs. We like hearing from you on social media. We like doing cool stuff with cool people. It's kind of the theme for the show and anyone in this hospitality industry who's doing cool stuff. So jump in. Can't wait to have you. And last but not least, we love 5-star reviews.
5 stars only.
Not just for our podcast, but also for the Modern Bar Cart. Give them 5 stars as well. But what we love is if you give us a 5-star review and you leave a negative comment and roast me, roast Mike, roast the show, tell us how you really feel. We'll read it on an episode. Give us those.
We're going to live to
reviews.
regret this. You know this, right?
I know it's coming. It's coming, and I'm very excited for it. So, Roast Me, tell us how much you love Mike's beanie that he wears
Oh
in
my
every
God.
episode. Roast my polo shirts. The Florida man with the polos, right, Mike? Is that what you said?
No, Mr. Passion in a polo.
Yeah. Hit us up. I think Eric's typing a negative review right now. So we can
No, I'm actually pulling
watching
up. I'm pulling up a negative review on mine that's a 1-star though. It's the title is Just Plain Bad.
Yes.
And by some bot name, or maybe not a bot name because somebody obviously typed this, but the review is this. The rating is 1-star. The review for the Modern Bar Cart podcast is sometimes not listen is way better than listening to talking heads that drone on and on.
Wow, that was very succinct. It talks about your concept, your show, everything. Like,
So
yeah, they really
the
had it
Modern
all.
Bar Cart podcast. Maybe don't listen.
Yeah.
Now, see if you do an episode on Bigfoot, you never know, man.
Yeah, maybe it'll turn everything around.
Win
Maybe
those
that
people
person-
back.
That one listener. No, truly, Eric, thank you for spending some time with us, sharing your
thank you.
story, talking about cocktail competitions. What a wealth of knowledge and everything that you can share with this industry. So, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Cheers to you, boys.
Cheers.
All right, let's clock out. What do you think?
Yeah, I got places to be.
Yeah, see you next time.